Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, humanity's first interstellar dreadnought, watching the alien fleet approach through the holographic display. The ship hummed beneath his feet with barely contained energy. 5 years of Earth's most advanced engineering condensed into 800 meters of tungsten carbide armor and quantum weaponry. Behind him, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, their movements betraying none of the tension that filled the recycled air. 47 vessels of unknown design emerged from the outer dark like nightmares given form. Their hulls gleamed with an oily, organic sheen that seemed to pulse with internal light, defying every principle of spacecraft engineering Kane had learned in his 30-year career. They moved wrong too, not with the predictable trajectories of reaction drives, but with the fluid grace of living things swimming through vacuum. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Rodriguez from her communications station, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. "We're receiving multiple signals on all frequencies. They're not just using our broadcast protocols. They're using them perfectly. No translation delays, no syntax errors. It's like they've been studying our communications for years." Kane felt the first cold touch of unease in his chest. Earth's first radio signals had only reached 15 light-years from Sol. If these creatures had been monitoring human communications, they'd been planning this encounter for decades. "Put it through," he ordered. The main screen flickered, static resolving into an image that would haunt humanity's nightmares for generations to come. The creature defied easy categorization, neither fully organic nor mechanical, but something that transcended both. Multiple eyes, each the size of a human fist, arranged in a perfect spiral pattern around what might generously be called a head. Tentacle-like appendages writhed beneath a carapace that shifted colors with each breath, cycling through hues that had no names in human language. When it spoke, its voice was a harmonious blend of tones that somehow conveyed infinite condescension, as if it were addressing a particularly slow child. "Primitive species, we greet you with the magnanimity befitting your limited development." Behind Kane, he heard Chief Science Officer Williams whisper a barely audible "Jesus Christ." The creature continued, its spiral eyes focusing with predatory intensity. "You will surrender your vessels and submit to hegemony processing. Your biological distinctiveness will be cataloged and preserved in our collective before your individual consciousness is terminated. This is not a negotiation." Kane stepped forward, his weathered face betraying nothing of the calculations racing through his mind. 30 years of naval service, from the resource wars to the Martian insurrection, had taught him to read enemies quickly. This thing wasn't making demands. It was stating facts, the way a butcher might inform cattle of their fate. "This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the United Earth Space Command," he replied, his voice carrying the authority of 10 billion human souls. "You have entered the Sol system without authorization and are in violation of territorial sovereignty. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The alien's spiral eyes seemed to rotate, and Kane could swear he saw amusement ripple across its features like wind across water. "Sol system, yes. Your star's designation in our cartographic database. We are the Zephyrian hegemony. We have consumed the essence of 1,400 species across this galaxy over the past 3 millennia. Your sovereignty is a delusion born of isolation." It leaned forward, and Kane noticed details that made his skin crawl. The way its carapace wasn't quite solid, the suggestions of movement beneath the surface, as if other creatures were swimming just under its skin. "Your species shows promise," the creature continued. "Unlike the last 17 civilizations we encountered, you achieved interstellar travel before destroying yourselves. This is noteworthy. Perhaps some of your genetic material will prove useful for integration into our collective." Kane felt rather than saw his bridge crew stiffen behind him. Chief Petty Officer Jackson's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm, a useless gesture in the face of alien technology, but a human one nonetheless. "You have 1 solar rotation to compile your surrender documentation," the creature concluded. "Any attempt at resistance will result in immediate processing of your population. The hegemony has never encountered a species capable of meaningful opposition." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the bridge in silence broken only by the soft hum of life support systems. Kane turned to his weapons officer, Commander Elena Vasquez, a woman whose ancestors had fought conquistadors in the mountains of Peru, and whose eyes now held the same fierce determination. "Status on Project Midnight Sun? Fully operational, sir," she replied, her fingers already calling up tactical displays. "The relativistic kinetic penetrator is locked and loaded. Power systems are at standby. We can achieve full charge in 18 hours. Kane studied the tactical display showing the Zephyrian fleet arranged in a perfect sphere around Uranus, their formation suggesting centuries of military experience. Behind them, barely visible on long-range sensors but unmistakably massive, loomed something that dwarfed even their largest vessels, likely their command ship or mothership. "Sir," Lieutenant Rodriguez interrupted quietly, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from their vessels. Whatever they're carrying, it's orders of magnitude beyond anything in our databases." Kane nodded grimly. The aliens had superior numbers, superior technology, and 3,000 years of conquest experience. By every rational calculation, humanity was about to join 1,400 other extinct civilizations. But Marcus Kane hadn't clawed his way up from the slums of Detroit to Admiral of the Fleet by accepting other people's calculations. "Not yet, Commander," he said, his voice carrying a promise that made Commander Vasquez smile. "Let's see what these apex predators are really made of first." Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, Director of Xenobiology, burst onto the bridge 12 hours later, her tablet clutched in white-knuckled hands and her usually pristine lab coat stained with what appeared to be coffee and stress sweat. Behind her trailed Dr. James Patterson, the colony communications specialist, his face pale as parchment. "Admiral, you need to see this immediately," Morgan gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "The Titan station, God help us, we were monitoring their feeds when it happened." Kane felt ice settle in his stomach. The Titan research station housed 300 scientists and support staff, Earth's most brilliant minds studying the outer system's resources. If the Zephyrians had reached them, "Show me," he commanded. The bridge's main holographic display shifted, replacing tactical readouts with surveillance footage from the Titan research station. The timestamp showed 6 hours ago, the moment the Zephyrian advance scouts had arrived. "Jesus Christ," whispered Communications Officer Rodriguez, her hand instinctively moving to her mouth. The station's personnel hadn't been killed. That would have been merciful. They'd been processed, converted into something that transcended humanity's worst nightmares of violation and transformation. The beings moving through the station's corridors retained just enough human features to be recognizable, a familiar gait here, a remembered facial structure there. But they moved with insectal precision and purpose that spoke of rewired nervous systems and replaced cognition. Dr. Morgan's voice shook as she provided commentary. "The process appears to be both biological and technological. Watch Dr. Richards here. That's him in the Blue Sciences Division uniform. 6 hours ago, he was analyzing ice samples. Now, on screen, the creature that had once been Dr. Richards moved through the quantum computing lab with impossible efficiency. His hands, if they could still be called hands, had been replaced with elongated, chitinous appendages that interfaced directly with the station's systems. Neural implants pulsed beneath translucent skin that had taken on a gray-green hue. The hegemony doesn't just conquer, Dr. Morgan explained, her scientific training warring with visceral horror. They don't enslave or exterminate. They assimilate. Every species they've encountered becomes part of their collective consciousness. Those aren't prisoners, Admiral. They're components in a living machine. Kane forced himself to watch as the converted technician accessed the station's central database with his new appendages, downloading humanity's accumulated knowledge of outer system resources with mechanical precision. The man's face, still recognizably human despite the grotesque modifications, showed no emotion, no recognition of what he had been. "How long does the process take?" Kane asked, his voice steady despite the churning in his gut. "Based on our observations, complete neural integration occurs within 4 hours of initial contact," Dr. Patterson replied, consulting his tablet with trembling hands, Physical modifications appear to be ongoing. They adapt the host body for whatever function the collective requires. Commander Vasquez leaned forward, her tactical mind cutting through the horror. Are they still conscious? Do they know what's happening to them? Dr. Morgan's silence stretched for several seconds before she answered. We detected brief periods of human neural patterns in the early stages. Distress signals, attempts to call for help. But they fade quickly. By the end of the process, she shook her head. Whatever made them human is gone. Overwritten. Kane studied the tactical display showing the 1400 civilizations the hegemony had claimed to assimilate. Each dot represented billions of individuals, entire cultures and histories reduced to biological components in an alien collective. They're not conquerors, he realized aloud. They're farmers. They cultivate species until they reach spaceflight, then harvest them. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Kane turned to face his senior staff, and Dr. Morgan saw something in his eyes that made her step back involuntarily. It wasn't fear or determination or even anger. It was the cold, calculating look of a predator recognizing another predator and deciding which one would survive the encounter. Every single one of those 1400 civilizations, Kane mused, his voice carrying a dangerous quiet, thought they were the apex species in their local region. Every one of them looked at the hegemony and saw conquerors. They tried to fight conquerors. He moved to the tactical display, his fingers tracing the Zephyrian fleet's formation. But conquerors want territory, resources, submission. These things want to erase us and wear our skin. Commander Vasquez felt a chill run down her spine at the Admiral's tone. She'd served under Kane for 8 years, through the Martian insurrection and the asteroid belt conflicts. She'd never heard him sound quite like this. Sir? She prompted carefully. Kane's smile was sharp as a blade and twice as cold. Commander Vasquez, begin charging the Midnight Sun array. Full power. Override all safety protocols. Sir, that will take 18 hours to reach full charge. They've given us 24 hours to surrender. Kane turned back to the display showing the assimilated humans of Titan Station, their humanity stripped away and replaced with alien purpose. Then we'd better get started. Because in 18 hours, these farmers are going to learn the difference between harvesting prey and hunting predators. The bridge crew exchanged glances, recognizing the shift in their admiral's demeanor. The man who had earned his rank fighting human enemies was gone. In his place stood something altogether more dangerous. A member of the species that had spent 200,000 years proving that there was no such thing as an apex predator, only the next meal. The Zephyrian High Commander Vexthera floated in the biofluid of her command chamber. Her consciousness interfaced directly with the mothership's vast neural network. The chamber itself was a marvel of organic engineering. A living room that pulsed with bioluminescent nodes, fed by arteries that carried nutrients and information in equal measure. Through 10,000 sensors distributed across her 5-kilometer mothership, she observed the pathetic human fleet arrayed before them. 3 dreadnoughts, 12 cruisers, and perhaps 30 support vessels. Laughable. Vexthera's consciousness expanded through the collective network, accessing the accumulated military knowledge of 1,400 conquered civilizations. The Crothery Empire had fielded fleets 1,000 times larger. The synthetic intelligences of the Nexus Collective had possessed weapons that could reshape matter at the quantum level. The bio-warriors of the Vortak Confederacy had fought with ships grown rather than built, their hulls harder than diamond and their weapons fueled by controlled stellar fusion. All had fallen before the hegemony's inexorable advance. Her tactical analysis algorithms, refined through 3 millennia of conquest and perfected by absorbing the strategic genius of countless species, processed the human formation in microseconds. The engagement would last perhaps 12 minutes, generous, considering the primitive nature of their technology. Their kinetic weapons were crude projectile systems barely evolved from chemical explosives. Their fusion missiles, while showing some ingenuity, would be easily absorbed by the hegemony's adaptive bioarmor. High Commander, her tactical subordinate reported through their shared neural link. The creature had once been the Grand Admiral of the Ilarian Republic, its brilliant blue-scaled form now augmented with hegemony biotechnology, its military genius seamlessly integrated into the collective. The human vessels are powering unusual energy signatures. Configuration unknown. Vexthara's attention sharpened, focusing on the lead human vessel through a dozen different sensor arrays. Deep within its hull, something was building power at an alarming rate. The energy signature defied classification. Not fusion, not antimatter, not even the exotic dark matter manipulations that several advanced species had attempted. Spectral analysis, she commanded, her consciousness diving deeper into the sensor data. Unknown energy matrix, High Commander. Magnetic field fluctuations suggest particle acceleration, but the scale. The tactical officer paused, uncertainty rippling through the neural link. High Commander, the power requirements exceed anything in our collective database. That gave Vexthara genuine pause. 1,400 species, their combined scientific knowledge spanning millions of years of development, assimilated and cross-referenced into the galaxy's most comprehensive technological archive. If the collective couldn't identify this primitive species weapon, then perhaps analysis of human tactical doctrine, she ordered. The response came instantly, filtered through the experiences of species who had fought humans in border skirmishes over the past century. Humans demonstrate unusual aggression for a pre-contact species, tendency toward asymmetric warfare, notable willingness to accept casualties. Emotional decision-making often overrides logical tactical choices. Vexthara processed this information with growing interest. Most species, when faced with superior force, exhibited predictable patterns: negotiation, surrender, or desperate final stands. The humans had done none of these. Instead, they were charging an unknown weapon while maintaining perfect formation discipline. Perhaps, she mused to her subordinates through the neural link, they aren't as primitive as they appear. The species that achieved interstellar travel without destroying themselves often possess unconventional solutions. She accessed the records of humanity's first contact protocols, intercepted from their own communications networks. The humans had spent decades preparing for alien contact, but their preparations had been overwhelmingly defensive. Bunkers, planetary shields, evacuation procedures. The mindset of prey animals preparing for predators. Yet this Admiral Kane showed no signs of fear. His communications patterns suggested a tactical mind at work, not a desperate creature facing extinction. Very well, Vexthara decided, her thoughts rippling through the collective consciousness. We shall take their flagship intact. I wish to examine this Admiral Kane before processing him. Perhaps his neural patterns will prove educational. The hegemony fleet began to advance, their bioorganic hulls rippling with protective energy fields. Weapon nodes blossomed across their surfaces like deadly flowers, each one capable of reducing the human vessels to their component atoms. The smaller ships took flanking positions while the heavy assault vessels moved to encircle the human formation. Behind them, hidden in the gravitational shadow of the gas giant Uranus, the mothership waited. A living mountain of flesh and metal, it housed 3 million assimilated beings from across the galaxy, a mobile civilization dedicated to the consumption of others. Its bioneural networks hummed with the combined consciousness of conquered species, their knowledge and memories woven into a tapestry of conquest. Vexthara felt the familiar surge of satisfaction as her fleet moved into optimal attack formation. The humans maintained their position with admirable discipline, but she could read the energy signatures of their vessels. Stress fractures in their formation, the minute hesitations that suggested growing awareness of their hopeless situation. High Commander, her communications officer reported. The human admiral is requesting dialogue. Interesting. Put him through. Admiral Kane's image appeared in her consciousness, and Vexthara studied him with predatory interest. His face showed the weathering of someone who had seen considerable combat, but his eyes held something she hadn't expected. Not the desperation of the doomed, but the cold calculation of a fellow predator. You know, Kane said conversationally, in all our preparations for first contact, we never actually considered that we might encounter something like you. Your preparations were inadequate, Vexthara replied. Kane's smile was sharp. Were they? Tell me, Commander, in your 1400 conquests, did any of them ever thank you for the lesson? The question was so unexpected that Vexthera felt a moment of genuine confusion. Lesson. The lesson that there's always something higher on the food chain, something deadlier, something that makes apex predators into prey. Before Vexthera could respond, Kane cut the transmission. And in that moment, with 3 million assimilated minds suddenly focused on the human fleet, the High Commander realized that perhaps Admiral Kane had been conducting the real analysis all along. 18 hours, sir. Commander Vasquez reported as the hegemony fleet closed to optimal engagement range. Her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Midnight Sun is at full charge. All safety protocols have been bypassed. Relativistic acceleration chambers are operating at maximum efficiency. Admiral Kane studied the tactical display with the intensity of a chess master contemplating the final move. The enemy fleet was spreading out in a perfect envelopment pattern, clearly intending to surround and overwhelm his small force. It was textbook predator behavior, ensure no prey escape to warn others. Behind him, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency born of months of drilling. Dr. Morgan stood at the science station, her xenobiology expertise now focused on analyzing the hegemony's bioships through every sensor array at their disposal. Chief Petty Officer Jackson had quietly moved to the weapons control backup station, his hand resting near the emergency firing controls. They all knew what was at stake. Sir, incoming transmission from the hegemony commander, Rodriguez announced, her fingers dancing across her console. Audio and visual on all frequencies. The main screen flickered to life, showing High Commander Vexthera in what appeared to be a more traditional bridge setting. Her biofluid chamber was gone, replaced by a crystalline command center that pulsed with organic light. Kane noticed the change immediately. She was trying to appear more conventionally military, perhaps seeking psychological advantage. Human Admiral, she spoke, her harmonious voice now carrying a hint of what might have been curiosity. Your energy signatures intrigue us. Our collective analysis suggests your species possesses knowledge worth preserving during the assimilation process. Surrender now, and we will allow your command staff to retain individual consciousness for an extended period. Kane felt the subtle shift in her approach. The absolute arrogance was still there, but underneath lay uncertainty. She didn't understand what she was facing, and that bothered her more than she wanted to admit. You're afraid, Kane stated simply, his voice cutting through the cosmic distance between them like a blade. Impossible. The hegemony knows no fear. We have faced the combined might of stellar empires. We have consumed species that weaponized black holes and creatures that built their ships from living stars. Then why offer terms? Kane stepped closer to the view screen, his weathered face impassive but his eyes holding predatory focus. 1,400 species, 3 millennia of conquest, and according to our analysis of your communication patterns, you've never offered terms before. You don't negotiate with livestock. For the first time, Vexthera's spiral of eyes showed something that might have been uncertainty. The collective consciousness of 3 million assimilated beings was analyzing this human admiral, and their combined wisdom was returning an unsettling conclusion. This was not prey behavior. Your point, human? Kane's smile was sharp as broken glass. My point is that there's a reason Earth survived long enough to reach the stars. We didn't claw our way to the top of our food chain by being prey animals that got lucky with technology. He turned to his weapons officer, and Commander Vasquez felt the weight of human history in his next words. Commander Vasquez, target the gas giant behind their fleet. Vasquez's fingers hesitated for a fraction of a second. Sir, there are no enemy ships in that vicinity. The gas giant is uninhabited. Trust me, Kane said quietly, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who had spent 3 decades making life and death decisions. Fire when ready. The UES Prometheus shuddered as the relativistic kinetic penetrator launched from its specially designed magnetic acceleration bay. The weapon was humanity's most carefully guarded secret, 3 years of development by Earth's finest physicists, funded by resources that could have built entire colonies. A tungsten carbide rod, 3 meters long and 30 centimeters in diameter, accelerated through a series of successive magnetic coils to 99.7% the speed of light. At that velocity, it carried more kinetic energy than most stellar phenomena. Dr. Morgan watched the energy readings spike beyond her instrument's ability to measure. "Admiral, the power discharge is—" She paused, checking her readings again. "Sir, we just released the equivalent energy of a small supernova in a focus beam. The Hegemony Fleet sensors detected the launch, but their targeting computers, designed to track conventional projectiles and energy weapons, couldn't process something moving at relativistic speeds. Their biological neural networks, refined through millennia of warfare, simply couldn't comprehend the physics involved. By the time their instruments registered the projectile's existence, it had already covered the distance to its target. Uranus, the 7th planet from Sol and 4th largest in the solar system, absorbed the impact of humanity's relativistic penetrator in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The tungsten rod, moving at near-light speed, struck the planet's core with the force of a controlled stellar collapse. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, nothing happened. The gas giant continued its ancient rotation, its storm bands swirling in patterns unchanged for millions of years. Then physics reasserted itself with catastrophic finality. The planet cracked along its equatorial axis like an egg struck by a hammer. Atmospheric gases erupted into space as the gravitational binding that had held the world together for 4 billion years failed in an instant. The northern and southern hemispheres separated, each half trailing streamers of superheated gas that lit up the void like twin comets. The shockwave hit the Hegemony Fleet 12 seconds later. Vexthera's consciousness reeled as 43 of her vessels were vaporized instantly by debris moving at substantial fractions of light speed. The remaining ships tumbled helplessly through space, their bioorganic hulls burned and torn by energies their adaptive armor had never been designed to absorb. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Kane watched the destruction with the satisfaction of a predator whose warning had been understood. "That," he said quietly to the alien commander whose image still flickered on the main screen, "was a warning shot." Commander Vexthera's consciousness reeled as the bioneural network of her mothership screamed in harmonized agony. The sound wasn't audible. It was deeper than that. A psychic shriek that resonated through every fiber of her being as 3 million assimilated minds experienced collective trauma simultaneously. The constant whisper of 1,400 civilizations sharing their knowledge, their memories, their very essence gone. The psychic shockwave from the planet's destruction had severed the neural links that bound the hegemony together. She was alone in her own head. "Status report," she gasped, her voice cracking as she spoke aloud for the first time in decades. The words felt strange on her tongue, primitive and inadequate after centuries of direct neural communication. Her bridge crew, a collection of converted beings from a dozen different species, stared at her with eyes that suddenly held something they hadn't possessed in generations. Individual thought, individual fear. The elegant Ilarian who had once been their greatest tactical minds looked around the bridge as if seeing it for the first time. The crystalline Nexary communications specialist touched her face with trembling appendages, remembering what it felt like to be herself. "High Commander," whispered her tactical officer, the former Grand Admiral of the Ilarian Republic, his blue-scaled face pale with shock. "The collective, it's gone. I can't hear the others. My memories, they're coming back." Vexthera felt panic rise in her throat as her own pre-assimilation memories began to surface. Flashes of her homeworld, of her original species, of the hegemony's arrival and her own conversion. Emotions she had thought permanently severed began to flood back. Fear, loneliness, grief for everything she had lost. On the main view screen, Admiral Kane appeared again. His weathered face was impassive, but his eyes held the cold satisfaction of a predator whose warning had been understood. Behind him, Vexthera could see his bridge crew working with quiet efficiency, their formation intact, their resolve unshaken. "That," Admiral Kane said quietly, his voice carrying across the void with devastating finality, "was a warning shot." Vexthera stared at him, her spiral of eyes wide with disbelief and growing horror. Warning shot? You destroyed an entire planet. You committed genocide against whatever life forms might have existed in that system. A gas giant. Uninhabited. Worthless except for potential mining operations. Kane's expression didn't change, but somehow it became more menacing. Would you like to see what we do to planets that actually matter to us? The human turned to someone off-screen, and Vexthera caught a glimpse of the weapons officer who had fired the impossible shot. Commander, lock onto the hegemony mothership. Load a full spread of relativistic penetrators. Target their bioneural cores. Admiral, wait. Vexthera's voice cracked with something that might have been desperation. The isolation in her own mind was overwhelming. 3 centuries of collective consciousness suddenly severed. You cannot. No species has ever. No species has ever what? Fought back effectively against your harvesting operation. Kane's smile was sharp as a vibroblade. Let me share something with you about human history, Commander. We've been killing apex predators since we learned to sharpen sticks. Every creature that thought it was at the top of the food chain learned otherwise when it encountered humanity. He gestured to the debris field that had once been Uranus, where her fleet's survivors drifted helplessly among chunks of planetary matter. Cave bears, saber-toothed cats, megalodons, Tyrannosaurus rex. Every single apex predator on our world, we either drove to extinction or made into our pets. Kane paused, letting that sink in while Vexthera struggled with the return of emotions she had forgotten how to process. The difference between humans and your previous 1400 conquests is simple, he continued. They were prey species that achieved spaceflight. We're a predator species that learned to leave our hunting ground. Around Vexthera, her command staff, no longer truly hers, she realized, as individual consciousness returned to them, began to remember their original identities. The Ilarian tactical officer straightened, his military bearing returning as he recalled leading fleets against the hegemony before his capture and conversion. The Nexary communications specialist's crystalline form began to glow with patterns Vexthera recognized as their species equivalent of tears. Through the fractured neural network, she could sense similar awakenings occurring throughout her fleet. Converted beings were remembering who they had been before the hegemony stripped away their individuality. And with those memories came rage. Internal explosions began to blossom across the surviving ships as former slaves turned on their converters, fighting with improvised weapons, sabotaging critical systems. The empire that had taken 3 millennia to build was collapsing from within as its foundation. The collective consciousness that bound them together crumbled. What have you done? Vexthera whispered, watching her civilization tear itself apart. Kane's eyes held no mercy, only the cold calculation of Earth's apex predator making a point. We've given your victims back their voices, Commander, and it sounds like they have quite a lot to say. Dr. Elizabeth Morgan watched from the secondary bridge as the crippled hegemony fleet drifted helplessly in the debris field that had once been Uranus. Her xenobiology training screamed at her that they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The first time the Zephyrian hegemony had been not just defeated, but systematically dismantled from within. Admiral, she reported over the comm, her voice tight with scientific excitement and horror in equal measure. I'm reading massive neural pathway disruptions across their entire fleet. The psychic shockwave from the planetary destruction appears to have severed their collective consciousness entirely. Every bioship in their formation is experiencing cascade failures in their living systems. Kane's voice came back grim but satisfied. Meaning what, Doctor? Meaning they're individuals again, sir. Possibly for the first time in centuries. Dr. Morgan pulled up detailed bio-readings on her screen. Each of those converted beings is remembering who they used to be, what species they belong to, what cultures the hegemony destroyed, what the collective stole from them. Their neural patterns are reverting to pre-assimilation baselines. On the main tactical display, they could see small explosions beginning to blossom across the hegemony vessels like deadly flowers. Internal conflicts were erupting as converted beings turned on their Zephyrian controllers, fighting with improvised weapons, sabotaging critical life support systems, and in some cases simply opening airlocks to vent entire sections into space. The Empire is collapsing from within, Dr. Morgan reported with something approaching awe. Admiral, this isn't just a military victory. You've triggered a galactic revolution. 3,000 years of conquest unraveling in real time. Kane absorbed this information in silence for a long moment, watching the greatest empire in galactic history tear itself apart. Then he opened a communication channel to the Hegemony mothership. Commander Vexthera appeared on screen, but she was no longer the confident apex predator who had demanded humanity's surrender. She stood on what appeared to be a traditional bridge, her organic command chamber burning behind her as smoke and biofluid leaked from damaged systems. Cuts and burns marked her carapace, and her spiral of eyes held exhaustion rather than arrogance. Around her, the sounds of combat could be heard as her own converted crew fought for freedom. "Human Admiral," she said, and her voice carried the weight of absolute defeat. "What are your terms?" Kane studied her for a long moment, and Dr. Morgan saw something shift in his expression. The cold predator was still there, but underneath it was something else, the strategic mind of someone who understood that true victory required more than simple destruction. "Here's what's going to happen, Commander," Kane said, his voice carrying the authority of Earth's dominant species. "You're going to broadcast a message on all hegemony frequencies, every communication channel your empire uses across the galaxy. You're going to tell every converted being in your collective that the neural links are broken, that they're free to remember who they were before you stole their identities." Vexthera's eyes closed in something that might have been grief. Around her, explosions rocked the mothership as 3 million assimilated beings realized they were no longer slaves. "That will destroy everything we've built. Our entire civilization will collapse." "Yes," Kane replied without hesitation. "It will." The weight of that simple statement hung in the void between them. 3 millennia of conquest, 1,400 civilizations absorbed, an empire spanning half the galaxy. All of it ending because humanity had proven that even apex predators could become prey. "And then?" Vexthera asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kane's expression didn't soften, but his tone carried the finality of someone making an irrevocable decision. "Then you're going to help them get home. Every species you've assimilated, every world you've conquered, every culture you've tried to erase, you're going to give it back. Your ships will become transport vessels. Your resources will fund reconstruction efforts. Your surviving leadership will coordinate the largest refugee operation in galactic history. You would make us into servants, slaves to our former victims. I would make you into something your species apparently never learned to be," Kane replied. "Useful." Vexthera stared at him through the screen, her alien features struggling with concepts her imperial mindset had never considered. "And if I refuse? If the surviving hegemony forces choose death over servitude?" Kane's smile was sharp as broken glass, but his eyes held the cold promise of Earth's apex predator. "Commander, you've seen our warning shot. You've watched us destroy a planet with a single projectile. Would you like to experience what we consider actual weapons?" He gestured to Commander Vasquez off-screen. "My weapons officer has 17 more relativistic penetrators loaded and targeted. Your mothership, your surviving fleet, your home system. We can erase them all from existence in under an hour. The choice is yours." The silence stretched between them for nearly a minute as Vexthera processed the ultimatum. Around her, the sounds of revolution continued as her empire burned from within. Finally, she spoke, her voice hollow with defeat. "Very well, Admiral. The hegemony submits to your terms. We will help them go home." Kane nodded once, satisfied. "Dr. Morgan will coordinate with your science teams to identify genetic markers for the various species you've assimilated. Commander Vasquez will oversee the dismantling of your weapons systems. And Commander," he added, his voice carrying a final warning, "any attempt at deception or sabotage will result in the immediate destruction of your remaining forces. Humanity doesn't believe in second chances for apex predators." As the transmission ended, Dr. Morgan realized they had just witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just the defeat of an empire, but its transformation from predator to protector, enforced by the quiet threat of total annihilation. 6 months later, Admiral Kane stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching ships depart for distant stars in what had become the largest peacetime armada in galactic history. Zephyrian vessels, their bioorganic hulls scarred but functional, carried freed beings back to homeworlds that many hadn't seen in centuries. The sight never failed to move him, predator ships transformed into arcs of hope, carrying the dreams of resurrected civilizations. Dr. Morgan joined him, carrying a thick tablet filled with reports from across the galaxy. Her hair had gone slightly gray in the past months. The stress of coordinating the most complex xenobiology project in human history had taken its toll, but her eyes held the satisfaction of someone witnessing miracles daily. "The latest updates from the Reformation fleet," she said, setting the tablet on the nearby table with a satisfied thud. "The Ilarian Republic has been re-established with their original government structure intact. The Kron Collective is 3 months ahead of schedule in terraforming their poison homeworld. Even some of the Zephyrians themselves are trying to build a new society based on individual consciousness rather than collective assimilation." Kane nodded, still watching the ships. A converted hegemony dreadnought passed by the station, its weapon pods replaced with hydroponic gardens visible through transparent aluminum viewports. Inside, he knew, were refugees from the Nexari Confederation, crystalline beings whose homeworld had been strip-mined for its quantum-resonant minerals 3 centuries ago. Now they were going home to rebuild. "Any word from the Outer Rim territories?" Kane asked. 3 more species have declared independence from the remaining hegemony holdout factions," Dr. Morgan replied, scrolling through her reports. "The Vortak Confederacy sent a formal diplomatic message. They want to establish permanent trade relations with Earth. They specifically mentioned that they'd heard humans were effective problem solvers when it came to galactic security issues." That drew a rare smile from Kane. "Is that what we're calling it?" "The galactic community is still trying to process what happened here, Admiral. 14 centuries of hegemony expansion ended in a single engagement. The psychological impact has been—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Transformative. Species that had accepted hegemony dominance as an immutable fact of existence are suddenly remembering what independence feels like." Dr. Morgan pulled up a 3-dimensional star chart on her tablet, showing the current state of galactic civilization. "The power vacuum is enormous, but it's being filled in ways we never anticipated. Hundreds of species are free for the first time in generations, but instead of descending into chaos, they're forming cooperative alliances. The shared trauma of hegemony oppression has created bonds that transcend traditional species barriers." Kane studied the chart, noting the emergence of new trade routes, diplomatic councils, and mutual defense pacts. And the remaining hegemony forces? Fragmenting rapidly. Without the collective consciousness to maintain unity, they're splitting along species lines. Most are following Vextra's example and participating in the repatriation efforts. A few hardliner factions are attempting to maintain the old ways, but Dr. Morgan gestured to another section of the chart where human patrol fleets were marked in blue. "Our rapid response teams have been quite persuasive in discouraging such behavior." Kane's expression grew thoughtful. "How many have we had to actually engage?" 7 incidents total. 3 were resolved through demonstration of our relativistic weapons capabilities. 4 required more direct intervention. Dr. Morgan's tone grew somber. "Complete destruction in each case. Word travels fast in the galactic community, Admiral. Most species have decided that cooperation is preferable to extinction." Through the observation window, Kane watched as a human exploration vessel prepared to depart Luna Station. The UES Magellan was bound for the Spiral Arm, carrying diplomats, scientists, and a small but decisive military escort. Humanity was expanding its presence, but not as conquerors, as guarantors of a new galactic order. "They'll learn to govern themselves," Kane said quietly, "or they won't and someone else will take their place. That's how evolution works, Doctor. The strong survive, the weak are consumed, and occasionally something comes along that changes the rules entirely." And which one are we? Dr. Morgan asked the same question she'd posed months ago. Kane was quiet for a long moment, considering the transformed galaxy spread out before them. Ships carrying former slaves home. Species rebuilding civilizations thought lost forever. Trade routes reopening after centuries of hegemony control. And everywhere, the quiet presence of human vessels ensuring that no new empire would arise to repeat the cycle. We're the species that looked at a galactic empire and decided it needed to be reminded that there are bigger predators in the universe, he said finally. But more importantly, we're the species that understood the difference between being apex predators and being monsters. He headed toward the door, then paused, his hand resting on the frame. Besides, Doctor, we didn't destroy the hegemony to become the new galactic empire. We destroyed it to make sure there would never be another one like it. The galaxy needed guardians, not new masters. As Kane left, Dr. Morgan remained at the observation window, watching the ships carry freedom to distant stars. In the reflected starlight, she could see the construction scaffolding around Earth's newest project, a defensive array that would ensure Sol System remained unconquerable, but more importantly, would serve as the command center for humanity's new role as galactic peacekeepers. But what truly filled her with hope were the exploration vessels preparing for humanity's next phase of expansion. Not as conquerors seeking new worlds to dominate, but as the galaxy's self-appointed guardians against anything that might try to repeat the hegemony's fundamental mistake. After all, as Admiral Kane had proven with devastating clarity, when Earth sent a warning shot, the entire galaxy paid attention. And in the months since that shot split a planet in half, the galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. There was always something higher on the food chain. Something that turned apex predators into prey. Something that had spent 200,000 years proving that evolution's greatest achievement wasn't the perfect predator. It was the species that could choose when to hunt and when to protect. Humanity had made its choice. The galaxy was learning to live with the consequences. And for the first time in 3 millennia, those consequences meant freedom.